Jenny spent years proving she was willing to leave America behind for Sumit. Now, Sumit may have to prove he is willing to leave India behind for Jenny. And that reversal is exactly why this story has people talking. Because after everything these two have survived, America is suddenly back in the conversation at the exact moment Jenny's health has become more serious than ever. Jenny has been diagnosed with ALS. Her family wants her closer to them in the United States. She reportedly should not make that long trip alone. And the person she needs beside her is Sumit. So now Sumit is trying to get permission to come to the United States with her. And immediately, one question showed up all over the conversation around this couple. Why now? For years, Sumit built his future around India. His family is there. His responsibilities are there. His identity is there. Jenny was the one who moved. Jenny was the one who adjusted. Jenny was the one who spent years proving she was serious enough to survive inside his world. And now, when Jenny is medically vulnerable, Sumit is suddenly looking toward America. That timing is going to make people suspicious. I understand it. But here's where this story gets much more interesting than a simple Sumit wants a green card headline. Because the confirmed explanation actually makes sense. Jenny's daughter, Christina, has said the immediate goal is to find a temporary way for Sumit to accompany Jenny because she should not be making that trip by herself. That is very different from announcing that Sumit is suddenly pursuing permanent residency. And if that explanation is accurate, then maybe Sumit's willingness to go to America is not the red flag people think it is. Maybe refusing to go would actually be the bigger red flag. But don't relax yet, because I still think Jenny has a legitimate reason to watch Sumit very carefully. It just isn't the reason some people online are pushing. The real issue isn't the visa. The real issue is what happens when Sumit is under pressure. Because if you look at the history of this relationship, there is one behavior that keeps coming back. He delays uncomfortable truth. And when you're talking about ALS, caregiving, international travel, money, and potentially moving countries, delayed honesty can become a much bigger problem than a visa ever was. That's where I think this story really begins. Let's start with what we actually know. Jenny's family has said she may need to return to the United States for additional medical care and support. They've also explained that Sumit's involvement in the visa process is connected to his role in helping her travel. Jenny and Sumit have also pushed back on some of the more extreme descriptions of her condition. There have been stories floating around making it sound like Jenny is completely bedridden, totally helpless, and basically incapable of functioning unless someone is beside her every second. But Sumit's public update painted a different picture. Jenny could still walk. She could still talk. She simply needed more help than she used to. And the long trip to America was no longer something she should safely handle alone. That's an important distinction, because people hear the word ALS and sometimes jump immediately to the most advanced version of the disease. Jenny can still be functioning and still be facing an incredibly serious medical reality. Those two things are not contradictory. And the same thing applies to Sumit. He can be doing the right thing by trying to accompany Jenny to America and still have a history that makes people question his judgment. Reality television makes us want one clean answer. Hero, villain, scammer, victim, good husband, bad husband. Jenny and Sumit have never been that simple. And that's why I think this story deserves a better question than, is Sumit using Jenny to get into America? The better question is, when Jenny's needs finally become bigger than Sumit's comfort, what does he do? Because that is new. For most of this relationship, Jenny has been the one doing the adapting. She moved to India. She lived far away from her daughters. She dealt with not speaking the language fluently. She dealt with a family that spent years resisting the relationship. She dealt with the emotional damage of learning that Sumit had not always been truthful with her. And through all of it, Jenny kept making the same basic decision. She chose the relationship. Even when viewers thought she was making a terrible choice, she chose it. Even when Sumit's family thought the relationship should end, she chose it. Even when the logistics looked impossible, she chose it. India became the price of having Sumit, and she paid that price. That is why America suddenly matters so much. Because for the first time, the geography may need to change around Jenny instead of Jenny changing around Sumit. That's a completely different test. If Jenny's best medical and family support is in the United States, then the old arrangement may no longer make sense. And if Sumit says, okay, then I go with you, I can't automatically call that suspicious. Actually, imagine if he did the opposite. Imagine Jenny tells him, I need to be closer to my daughters. My doctors don't want me traveling alone. I need help. And Sumit responds, sorry, I chose India years ago. You're going by yourself. People would lose their mind. The same viewers questioning why he wants to go to America would probably say, Jenny gave up her entire life for this man, and he can't even travel with her when she's sick, and they would have a point. So the timing alone does not prove anything. The circumstances change. A healthy spouse wanting you to relocate is one conversation. A spouse with a progressive neurological disease needing help getting home is a completely different conversation. But this is where Sumit's history becomes impossible to ignore. Because Jenny isn't married to somebody with a perfectly clean record when it comes to transparency. This relationship literally began with a false identity. That does not mean every future accusation against Sumit is automatically true. But it does mean trust was damaged before this relationship had even fully started. And then, the marriage situation made everything worse. Jenny made enormous emotional and practical decisions while major information about Sumit's life was still unresolved or hidden from her. Think about what that does psychologically. When someone has blindsided you before, you don't only react to the new problem, you react to the memory of every previous surprise. So when Sumit later tells Jenny something huge, Jenny isn't hearing one isolated piece of information. She is hearing an echo. Here we go again. And then, years later, we get the debt confession. Sumit revealed that he had taken on roughly $15,000 to $20,000 in loans during their financial problems. Jenny did not know. Now that is a red flag worth discussing. Not because people never borrow money. Not because debt automatically makes somebody dishonest. Sometimes families get desperate. Sometimes people make bad financial choices while trying to hold everything together. But when you're married, borrowing that kind of money without your spouse knowing is not just a financial decision. It's a trust decision. It affects the household. It affects housing. It affects future options. It affects your spouse's sense of security. And Jenny found out after the decision had already been made. That is the part that keeps bothering me. Because if you line up these moments, there appears to be a very specific Sumit pattern. Not necessarily evil, not necessarily calculated, but definitely dangerous. When Sumit sees conflict coming, he seems tempted to delay it. He tries to handle the situation himself. He wants to fix the problem before Jenny knows how bad it is. Maybe he tells himself he's protecting her. Maybe he tells himself he's avoiding unnecessary drama. Maybe he genuinely believes he can solve the problem before it affects her. But once you're married, that logic becomes a problem. Because you are not protecting your spouse by removing their ability to make informed decisions. You're deciding for them. And that is where avoidance starts looking a lot like control. Even when control was not the original intention. Think about the cycle between these two. Sumit knows Jenny can have a strong reaction, so he gets nervous about telling her bad news. He delays, he hides, he tries to manage things privately. Jenny eventually discovers what happened. Now, Jenny is not only angry about the original issue, she's furious that she was left out, so her reaction becomes even bigger. Sumit sees that reaction and thinks, see, this is exactly why I didn't tell her sooner. And the cycle repeats. That dynamic can destroy trust, because eventually one person becomes afraid to speak, and the other becomes afraid to believe. And now they are entering a stage of life where that cycle cannot continue. Jenny has alls. This is not the time for I'll tell her later. This is not the time for hidden loans. This is not the time for half-finished plans. This is not the time for Sumit to pretend he has everything under control because he doesn't want another argument. Caregiving requires transparency. Medical planning requires transparency. Immigration requires transparency. International travel requires transparency. Financial planning definitely requires transparency. And if Jenny's condition becomes more demanding, the smallest communication weakness could become a huge practical problem. That's why I keep saying the visa isn't actually the test. The visa is just the doorway into the test. The test is whether Sumit can become the kind of partner Jenny now needs. And that partner may look very different from the romantic partner he has been trying to prove himself as for years. For a long time, Sumit's big demonstrations of love were dramatic, standing up to his parents, choosing Jenny, defending the marriage, staying with her despite family pressure. Those moments look huge on television, but caregiving doesn't usually look huge. It looks repetitive. It looks exhausting. It looks boring. It looks like remembering appointments, handling paperwork, listening to doctors, making travel arrangements, managing money, making sure medications are right, recognizing when you need help, being honest when you're tired, being honest when you're scared, being honest when you don't know what you're doing. And maybe most importantly for Sumit, telling Jenny the truth before he decides how to solve the problem. That's where I think we are going to find out more about this marriage than any argument with his mother ever showed us. And speaking of his family, this is another area where the story has completely changed. For years, Jenny getting accepted by Sumit's parents felt like the finish line. That was the dream. If his family could finally accept the relationship, maybe everything would settle down. And eventually, the impossible started looking possible. There was more acceptance. Jenny and Sumit even ended up living within his family structure again. But here's what reality TV teaches us over and over. Getting what you wanted does not mean you're going to like living with it. Jenny wanted acceptance. She did not necessarily want to give up independence. Those are different things. You can want your mother-in-law to stop rejecting you without wanting to share your entire daily life with her. You can want family peace without wanting family involvement in every decision. And Jenny has talked about wanting her independence back. That is incredibly important now. Because before her diagnosis, independence was mostly emotional. Privacy, space, freedom, feeling like she and Sumit had their own marriage instead of living inside his parents' household. After an ALS diagnosis, independence becomes physical and logistical. Can Jenny get where she needs to go? Can she access the right care? Who helps if Sumit isn't available? How close is she to family? What happens if her needs increase? Who handles transportation? Who handles paperwork? Who understands the medical system? Where is her support network strongest? Suddenly, things that used to feel like lifestyle preferences become serious planning questions. And this is where geography becomes brutal. Jenny's daughters are in America. Her long-term life with Sumit has been in India. Those two worlds are now pulling in opposite directions. When Jenny was healthy and independent, she could say, "This is my choice. I want to live in India." Nobody had to agree. It was her life. But serious illness changes the cost of that choice. Being thousands of miles away from your children feels different when you're healthy enough to book a flight whenever you want. It feels very different when that flight itself becomes something doctors worry about you making alone. That's why I think the saddest part of this entire story is not the visa. It's that Jenny may finally be confronting the downside of a sacrifice she willingly made years ago. And I want to be clear about something. That does not mean Jenny made the wrong choice. We love judging reality TV relationships with hindsight. People will say, "See, she never should have moved." But nobody builds a relationship while knowing exactly what medical diagnosis they will receive years later. Jenny made the choice that made sense to her based on the life she wanted. Now, life changed. And when life changes, good relationships have to change with it. Which brings us back to Sumit. For more than a decade, the question was always whether Jenny could fit inside Sumit's world. Can Jenny live in India? Can she handle his culture? Can she survive his family? Can she accept his responsibilities? Can she keep waiting? Can she forgive him? Can she prove that she is committed? Now I think the entire question flips. Can Sumit fit inside Jenny's world? Can he go to America if that's what her health requires? Can he tolerate being away from his parents? Can he accept being the foreign spouse for one? Can he function in a system where Jenny's daughters may have stronger voices? Can he accept that medical necessity may outrank family tradition? And maybe the biggest question of all, can he handle losing control over the environment? Because Sumit knows how India works. He knows the family system. He knows the language. He knows the expectation. Jenny has always been the outsider there. America would reverse that. Jenny's family would be closer. Jenny would understand the system better. Sumit might be the one depending on other people. And that kind of role reversal can reveal a lot about a marriage. This is also why fan reaction is so divided. Some fans genuinely believe Sumit loves Jenny, and I understand that position. This relationship has lasted far longer than many couples people assumed were more normal. He went through years of family conflict. He stayed. He eventually married Jenny. He has been part of her life through enormous stress. And right now, according to the family's own description, he has been helping care for her. For those viewers, the visa is not suspicious. It's exactly what a husband should be doing. Then there is another group of viewers that I think has the most nuanced take. They basically say, "I believe he loves Jenny. I just don't trust his decision." And those are not the same thing. Love does not automatically make somebody financially responsible. Love doesn't cure conflict avoidance. Love doesn't make somebody good at difficult conversations. Love doesn't stop people from panicking. And love definitely doesn't guarantee good judgment. You can love someone deeply and still be a terrible planner. You can love someone and still hide bad news because you don't want to deal with their reaction. You can love someone and still make decisions that damage their trust. That, to me, is the most interesting place to analyze Sumit. I don't need to believe he's secretly plotting something. The documented behavior gives us enough to question whether he is prepared for the responsibility coming his way. Then you have the viewers who are much more suspicious. Some fans look at the hidden debt. They look at his financial instability. They look at the timing of the America conversation. They remember the catfishing, and they say, why should Jenny trust this completely? I don't think that question is unfair. What becomes unfair is when a question suddenly turns into a conviction. There is a huge difference between this timing makes me suspicious and this proves he's using Jenny. One is an opinion based on history. The other is a factual accusation that needs evidence. And right now, the public information does not support treating a green card exploitation theory as established fact. The immediate plan, according to Jenny's family, is connected to medical travel and temporary entry. That matters. The same goes for some of the darker rumors circulating around this situation. There have been claims about Sumit being physically threatening, claims that he routinely abandons Jenny while she is helpless, claims that his mother supposedly issued some kind of visa ultimatum. Those are serious accusations, and serious accusations require serious sourcing. Rumor stack on top of rumor is not evidence, especially when Jenny and Sumit's own updates have contradicted some of the most extreme descriptions of her being completely bedridden and abandoned. And honestly, this is one reason I think the real story is more powerful than the fake scandal. You don't need to turn Sumit into some cartoon villain. Look at what is actually happening. Jenny has ALS. Her future medical needs are uncertain. Their finances have already been shaky. Sumit recently admitted to taking on major debt without telling Jenny. They've had housing problems. Jenny has struggled with losing independence. His family remains an important part of his life. Her daughters may now become much more important in day-to-day decisions. And international travel depends on immigration paperwork that may not create a simple long-term solution. That is already a pressure cooker. There's no need to invent a secret conspiracy. And I think the debt confession becomes even more significant when you place it next to Jenny's diagnosis. Imagine you're Jenny. Your body has become less predictable. Your future has become less predictable. You are already dealing with a disease that takes away certainty. The last thing you need is for your marriage to take away even more certainty. That is why hidden information becomes so damaging now. Jenny needs to know where they stand financially. She needs to know what Sumit can realistically handle. She needs to know what their options are. She needs to know whether he is telling her the full truth, even when the truth is ugly. Because when your health is unstable, your partner has to become part of the structure holding everything else together. You cannot be wondering whether another surprise is waiting around the corner. And this is where the age gap enters the story in a completely new way. For years, their 30-year age difference was treated like a social controversy. His parents hated it. Viewers debated it. People made jokes about it. There were questions about attraction, sex, family approval, and whether Sumit would eventually regret marrying someone so much older. But now the age gap isn't just a social issue. It's part of a much larger conversation about life stage, caregiving, health, retirement, money, physical support, mortality. And I want to be very careful with this because ALS is not some predictable punishment for being older. This is what happens when you marry somebody 30 years older. That would be ridiculous. But couples with a large age gap do eventually confront the reality that their physical needs may change at very different times. For years, that was theoretical. Now it's not. Sumit is no longer being asked to prove he can tolerate other people's judgment about his wife's age. He may be asked to care for her through a serious progressive illness. That's an entirely different commitment. And I think this could also change the role of Jenny's daughters. For years, they could have opinion. They could worry. They could question her decision. But Jenny was an adult making her own life. She chose India. She chose Sumit. She chose to stay. Her daughters could advise her, but they couldn't make the decision for her. Now, Jenny may need more practical help. And when adult children become involved in a parent's healthcare, especially when there is a spouse with a complicated history, family tension can happen very quickly. Not because anybody is evil, because everybody may think they're protecting Jenny. One daughter may think Jenny needs to stay in America. Sumit may believe Jenny is emotionally happier in India. Someone may worry about money. Someone may worry about whether Sumit can remain in the United States long enough. Someone may think he is doing everything possible. Someone else may remember the debt and wonder whether he can manage the responsibility. And here's the dangerous part. Everybody can love Jenny and still disagree. That could become one of the biggest sources of conflict going forward. So what happens next? I think people expecting some dramatic Sumit gets to America and reveals his master plan storyline are probably looking in the wrong direction. The more realistic problems are much more complicated. First, can Sumit actually get permission to accompany Jenny? If he does, then what? How long can he remain? What happens if Jenny needs to stay in America longer than originally expected? Where do they live? How much help comes from Jenny's daughters? What does treatment cost? What happens to Sumit's financial responsibilities in India? What happens to his parents? What happens if he needs to go back? What happens if Jenny doesn't want to go back? And what happens if the two of them discover that the arrangement that worked when Jenny was healthy simply cannot work anymore? That is the storyline I would watch. Because every major problem Jenny and Sumit have faced before could be delayed. Family doesn't approve? Keep fighting. Marriage is complicated? Wait. Parents are angry? Give it time. Money is bad? Borrow. Housing isn't working? Move somewhere else. But illness doesn't always give you unlimited time. Some decisions need to be made. And some choices don't have a version where everybody wins. Maybe Jenny needs America. Maybe Sumit wants to be with her but struggles being separated from his family. Maybe his parents finally have to accept that their son cannot prioritize them the same way anymore. Maybe Jenny has to accept more dependence after spending years fighting to prove she could live life on her terms. None of that requires a villain. Sometimes life creates the conflict for you. And that's why I think Sumit's next chapter is going to tell us more about him than his entire history on the franchise. Can he be dependable when nobody is applauding? Can he be honest when the truth makes Jenny angry? Can he tell her the financial reality before making another decision? Can he admit when caregiving becomes too much? Can he work with Jenny's daughters instead of feeling threatened by their involvement? Can he prioritize Jenny's needs when those needs pull him away from everything familiar? And maybe most importantly, can he finally stop treating difficult information like something he has to manage alone? Because if he cannot, the next crisis could hit much harder than the last one. Jenny has forgiven Sumit for a lot. The false identity, the marriage complication, years of family chaos, financial uncertainty, the hidden loan. Every time, Jenny made the same calculation. The relationship was worth another chance. But alls changes the math. Now, the question is no longer whether Jenny loves Sumit enough to keep fighting for the marriage. I think we've answered that. The question is whether Sumit can become the stable partner Jenny needs when love alone is not enough. And I think that is the part some viewers miss. I absolutely believe it's possible that Sumit loves Jenny. That doesn't automatically mean he's ready for this. Love and reliability are two different skills. Love and financial responsibility are different. Love and honesty under pressure are different. Love and caregiving are different. You can have all the emotion in the world and still fail somebody because you are overwhelmed, disorganized, avoidant, or scared. That's why I don't need the green card theory to make this situation concerning. The reality is already complicated enough. Jenny's diagnosis is real. Her need for more support is real. The effort to get Sumit to America is real. Their financial problems are real. His hidden debt is real. Their long history of trust problems is real. And the future is going to force this marriage to deal with all of those things at the exact same time. Maybe Sumit going to America will prove the skeptics wrong. Maybe he steps up. Maybe he becomes the partner Jenny spent all these years believing he could be. But maybe the bigger challenge isn't getting on the plane. Maybe it's what happens after the plane lands. Because Jenny once moved across the world to build a life around Sumit. Now, life may be asking Sumit to do the reverse. And this time, there's no family argument he can wait out. No secret he can fix later. No financial problem he can quietly manage and explain afterward. Jenny's health may require decisions now. So I want to know where you land on this. Does Sumit's sudden effort to get to America make you suspicious because of his history? Or does Jenny's ALS diagnosis completely explain why his position has changed? And here's the question I think matters even more. After Jenny spent years proving how much she was willing to sacrifice for Sumit, are we finally about to find out how much Sumit is willing to sacrifice for Jenny?